Greetings, hypnotists, NLP practitioners, and normal people too. This is the world-renowned Brain Software Podcast, episode 144. I'm Chris Thompson, and today, Mike Mandel and I discuss ego states, those wonderful subpersonalities we all have and enjoy. So stay tuned.
Hey man, what's happening, Stro? I'm just loving this old-time locomotive ride. We're gonna skim right by the hypnotic tornado by a few hundred feet. Hey, not so close, Pouch. We're heading right into the vortex of the tornado.
We are not witches!
Man, I'm out of here before the impact. Kinetic energy's not my bag. Kill Physicsum.
Welcome to Dealey Plaza, dear friends, where there's not an ant in sight. Not since the Shizjig Corporation took over in the stewardship of great assassination memorials. But whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? These are days of victory! We've arrived at Willoughby, safe and sound, and...
Isn't that the hospital where you died?
Time to welcome to the director's chair the Frank Capra of Hypnotic Persuasion, the Francis Ford Coppola of Fresh Procedure, the Bane of Ernest Stavro Blofeld, Mike Mandel!
Yes, Bavarch and Vooty, Chris.
Bavarch
again.
and Vooty, all right, so here we are.
144, man.
Epicenter of hypnosis. Toronto, Canada.
Ugh.
Kicking butt and enjoying life. We want to remind you that before
Quick
we
commercial.
begin, this is actually, we're not even going to do that yet. We're going to just tell you that today's podcast is going to be about ego states.
All
Why
about
are we
ego
doing
state.
that?
Because ego state personality theory is fundamental to any kind of change. And
We all have
understanding
parts.
this can make your life way better.
And all of you out there, if there's a part of you that wants to work harder to accomplish something, but there's a part of you that wants to sit on the couch and do nothing and watch Netflix, that's what we're talking about here. Ego states are those different sub-personalities, and that's what we're going to be getting into in this episode.
Yes.
So before we do, let's tell you about the live events that we've got coming up in the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada. Our new classroom down at the area of Queen and Bay Street, right downtown Toronto. An amazing spot. Come on and check out the architecture of hypnosis along with the guest trainings that we've got coming up. David Snyder's coming in October, and well before that, we've got Bob Burns, the amazing man behind the Swan Protocol.
The Flying Scotsman himself.
Coming in April. And the URL to visit is MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. Spots are filling up quickly, so make sure you check it out and come to Toronto and study with us.
You'll love it.
All right, and with that said, let's get on with the show.
Okay,
Mike,
well, let's talk about the think tank words. Chris, as usual, I didn't use the actual think tank. I'm finding it so easy to go onto the random noun generator. And here are the three we have. Number 1, audience.
All right, number 2.
Motion.
And number 3.
Sweatshirt.
Audience, motion, and sweatshirt.
So start with audience. What does that say to you today?
That's
context of the
interesting. So in the
podcast?
context of ego states, I would say that this means to me that there are certain times when I will say certain things because I'm looking for a response from my audience. And so what is it that drives me to think about, well, what are my needs? Well, in many times, I'm looking for some sort of validation and attention and things like that. So that is what audience means to me.
Well, to me, yeah, and that's a good point. To me, a mistake new entertainers often make is they don't know their audience. You have to remember who you're speaking to. Mm-hmm. And I gave an example today in a totally different context. You don't go on stage like Tony Robbins if you're speaking to retired Bank of Canada guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to know your audience and give them what they require.
Yep. And if you're playing with children, maybe putting on your nuclear physicist ego state is not correct. Like,
Good point.
They don't want to hear about atomic particles.
Yeah,
when they
certainly
want
not atomic bombs.
They want to play with Peppa Pig or whatever it is, right? So get the right ego state in.
Now, motion ties into this too. To me, it says keep this freaking podcast moving. We got to remember our audience is listening and keep this damn thing moving this time.
Yep, and with ego states, motion means you can fluidly transition from one ego state to another, one part to another. The part of you that is podcasting can suddenly turn off and be the part of you that's making stupid jokes at lunch, Mike.
I love it.
Although that's the same ego state, really, because that's all this podcast is stupid jokes.
No, it's great content, though, too. On my vast years of experience, sweatshirt, Chris. When I hear sweatshirt, I think of, I don't think sweaty. I think casual.
I was just going to say, I think comfort. I think cozy.
And
Sunday
it's cold
morning
still.
coffee.
Groundhog Days passed, but so we think of our audience. We want to give them something that's useful. We're going to keep things in motion, but we're going to be casual about the whole thing, comfortable and really laid back.
Right. All right.
So what the hell are ego states, Chris?
And why are they so important? Well, ego states, we consider them to be sub-personalities. So every person out there has a bunch of different pieces to their personality, right? And if you want to think of those pieces as sub-personalities, you can. There's the part of you that enjoys learning. There's the part of you that likes jokes. There's the part of you that wants to be the center of the attention. And then there's the part of you sometimes that just wants to sit back and observe and watch what's going on, like watching a movie.
That's well done, because in NLP, they call it parts theory, parts therapy. It's the same thing, whether you call them sub-personalities, you call them parts, whether you call them ego states. The work really is, this is mainstream. This isn't fringe stuff. It goes back to Paul Fredern, who was a compatriot of Sigmund Freud. Watkins and Watkins, husband and wife psychology team, picked up on it, wrote about them, did some, I think, ego state mapping, finding out which ones know about each other and so on. And finally, it takes us to Gordon Emerson. I believe he's an Australian psychologist who I consider to be probably the world's leading authority on working with ego states. In fact, Emerson's gone so far now as he doesn't call them ego states anymore. He calls them resource states, because when we recognize that not only are they sub-personalities, they are resources. They have particular strengths and value that we can apprehend if we know how.
Makes sense. Okay, and as you said, that in the world of neuro-linguistic programming, they're called parts, and we think of them as sub-personalities.
So where do they come from?
Where do they come from? Well, I guess they come from development as a child.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
When your brain is forming and you're exposed to all kinds of different things going on, different emotions and different everything.
Yeah, they are sort of created.
They're adaptive responses.
Adaptive responses, exactly, in specific needs. And so most of them are created in childhood. I don't know specifically whether or not they are now still created when we're adults, but they are created in childhood. But it's important to remember, as Gordon Emerson points out, our personalities are digital, not analog. They aren't a dimmer switch. Each of these ego states, if you point at yourself, you're pointing at an ego state. If you say, I am here, you're saying it's an ego state speaking. And they can pop in and out very, very quickly, but they are digital. You can only have one executive at a time. Why don't you explain what executive means?
Yeah, so executive, we've said this before. We'll give a quick recap of it. Think of the idea of a teacher in a classroom with a bunch of kids, and the teacher has to walk out of the room because the principal's called her down to the office to have an important meeting about, I don't know, the after-school whatever's going on. And so all the kids are in the classroom and they can't be left on their own, so one kid has to be put in charge temporarily. And that kid is the ego state in the executive, sitting at the teacher's desk.
Right. And recognize in this nice model, we are committees. I mean, we are functioning committees. And the difference between us and someone who's dissociative identity disorder used to be multiple personality. Yeah, most of our ego states know about each other, which means in the physical structure of the brain, they have clear neural pathways connecting them to each other, which is very, very interesting. There's nothing wrong with having sub-personalities. In fact, it's the normal way to be. You gave the classroom example. In that classroom of 30 or 40 kids, well, of course, in your ego state, organization in your brain, not in your mind, but your brain, you'll deal with the same 5 to 15 on a daily basis, but you may have up to 50 or even 150 ego states. So imagine a large classroom and the kids, some of them are in their own little clique. They hang out together. Others haven't spoken up in years. One might be standing in the corner. A couple might be bullies. Mm-hmm. They're all different, but the one that's sitting in the teacher's chair is the one that's executive. But the example I like even better, Chris, is the model of a bungalow with a basement and a bomb shelter.
Yeah, I like that
This
one.
is fabulous. Think of a single-story home, and there's one door. And on the main floor, those are your 5 to 15 ego states that live your daily life, interact with your spouse or your girlfriend or husband or whatever, play with your kids, do your job, drive your car. The 5 to 15 are the ones in the living room. The executive ego state is the one that answers the door at any given moment, is the one standing at the door dealing with the world. But below this main floor, you have a basement. And the basement is the other 50 to 150 that are seldom executives. Sometimes they come up into the living room and maybe answer the door, but not very often. And then off the basement, you have in this wonderful model a bomb shelter. And these are the ones that are hiding out. I mean, these ego states are what we call vaded. Gordon Emerson's term for invaded by fear, anger, sadness, trauma. These hide in the bomb shelter. They need to be healed and integrated into the rest of the family.
That's a really good model. I like that a lot. So basically just rooms of a bungalow and a basement. Okay, cool. So where are we going from here?
Well, they look and sound and act differently from each other because they have specific purposes. And it's important for people to realize that. I've said before, a dear friend of mine, Zoe, was an agent I had, and she passed away a few years ago, cancer, maybe 10 years ago now. And she'd be in a funk, would call me up because she wasn't getting any gigs for all the acts that she was booking. And she'd whine on the phone, whining, and Mike, and this isn't working, and I can't get any money, and this isn't working. And I could change her ego state by asking her about her little dog, Benji. I'd say, how's Benji doing? 2 second silence. She'd go, Benji's doing really good. He's here with his mommy. Her playing with the dog ego state would become executive, and it would sound completely different. Now, you got an excellent little dog.
Oh, yeah, Ollie.
Ollie is here. He's not here now. He's upstairs.
Yeah, he's up.
But when you play with Ollie
Yeah.
and call him Stinky Winky, like I do with my Egyptian Mao.
Oh, he's
barking right now. Woo! When you play with him, you may have an ego state that's similar to the one that deals with your kids, right?
Oh, you know what the worst thing that I'll catch myself doing is?
I'm afraid to ask.
Yeah, I bet you are. Let's say I know, I should be playing with a dog right now. I should be playing something. But as I'm doing that, I'm not being mindful and present in the moment. Instead, I'm thinking, well, I got to get this other thing done, that other thing done, and I've got a busy day. And so it's almost like sometimes I'll catch myself and the playful ego state is not in the executive. I'm just going through the motions. But it's the businessman ego state that's in executive. Playing, like I may as well be wearing a freaking suit and tie to play with my dog, right? Because I'm thinking, I need to get on with the rest of my day here now instead of no, freaking change the ego state, get the right one in the executive, play with the dog, enjoy it like I was a 5-year-old, and that's what I'll catch myself doing, and then remind, you know what? No, all of this can wait. I'm going to play with my dog for 10 minutes.
That's a really good point because the key is having the right one executive, a functional one executive. If I'm teaching jujitsu, I don't want the ego state present. That's, a romantic dinner with my wife or the one that plays with my Egyptian Mao or my baby cheetah. It's not the right one. You want the right one executive. But some of them are quite powerful. They have stronger neural pathways and they can muscle others out of the executive, which is kind of interesting.
And they're probably the ones that you're using most, right? The neural pathways are reinforced by use.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Neurons that wire together, fire together, wire together, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
Fire together, wire together.
Yeah.
They shake hands.
So
and then you get long-term potentiation after that.
So,
interesting, man.
Yeah, it's the pathways down a forest, right? Where the animals are always walking down a certain pathway. There's no grass or weeds or anything growing. It's a path.
Yeah.
Right? And the more
easy to walk on.
The more you use your neurology to keep those ego states in the executive, the more easy it is going to be for that to keep happening.
Now, that's interesting, Chris, because having different ego states for different purposes. I let it go because my correcting grammar ego state wasn't executive. It's paying close attention now. When I teach, Chris, I have 3 ego states functioning. Yeah. There's my teacher ego state, which is the one that works with a group and is very congruent and so on.
And then you have the
But remember that one accidentally was executive when I did a hypnosis show in Coburg, Ontario years ago. And a friend of our family said, well, he was teaching. He wasn't very entertaining. And I'd been teaching a lot for Derek Balmer. The wrong ego state was on. I needed an entertainer on the stage, not a teacher. So when I teach a class, I've got my normal teaching ego state. To my right in my imagination, but an actual ego state is my librarian.
Yeah.
He has access to everything I've learned.
All the facts, all the figures,
all the hypnosis history. He will feed it
quotes.
to he'll feed that to my teaching state as needed. And on the other side, I've got my jester ego state, which is an archetype. He's like a Jewish comedian, even though I'm Presbyterian. Yeah. And he is just sitting there or standing next to me, waiting for the moment he's going to deliver a zinger line. And the weird thing is, I know there's a line coming up. I can feel him trying to become executive when I'm teaching, but I don't know what the line is. And bang, he becomes executive, delivers the line. Everybody laughs. The librarian writes the line down immediately and files it for future use.
Yep.
And the teaching state comes. I mean, I'm not saying this as a joke. This is literally what happens with my ego states.
Yeah. Now, please understand, folks, Mike doesn't actually believe that these are like actual people that he's hallucinating exist.
No.
These are just structures of the brain, and he's creating a model to explain the way he thinks about it. Right. So he's not insane.
No, and we're all the same. You know, we all have different part. You know, I want to go on vacation. I really want to go to Jamaica, but I really should save the money. There's two parts in conflict.
My kids' education. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I have my 007 ego state, which I find quite funny. It becomes executive for very short periods of time in emergencies. And it's essentially unafraid and very capable. I'll give you an example. I was on Highway 401 with my wife. Highway 401 across Toronto is the busiest stretch of highway in North America at 16 lanes wide. I was doing a lane change, and the idiot to my right did not check his blind spot and started to spin right into my lane really fast.
Nice.
And I looked back from checking my blind spot, and immediately the bond state was executive. I did the evasive move around this guy, hit the brakes, the turn, hit the gas, and I checked. I put my finger on the carotid artery. And my pulse hadn't even been raised. And my wife went, wow, that's pretty amazing, which is good because typically she'd criticize me for crazy driving, but it was what rescued us at that moment. Ego state, buddy.
Excellent. Fantastic.
You're doing your Sean Connery ego state. You got your Arnold ego state. Now, let me just clarify. Even though Chris is doing Sean Connery and Arnold Schwarzenegger at times, he doesn't believe he actually is those people, and he isn't insane.
What are you talking about, you silly person?
The key is to have
crazy man.
Right one executive when you need it executive. Now, here's the thing for therapists who are listening that is really helpful for you if you pay attention to this. Have you maybe worked with EFT or one of the tapping protocols or an NLP rewind technique? If you do sloppy work to get rid of trauma or, phobia or whatever, sometimes it doesn't go away, even though it seems like you're doing everything right. The reason why is you must get the traumatized, the evaded ego state executive when you're doing the work. Mm-hmm. That's why it's crucial that the person feels in their body the problem. You want it to become executive.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And this is so true, just even for conversation. So again, I know that most people listening to this podcast probably are not professional hypnotists, therapists, coaches, or anything like that. It's usually a lot of just interested people who are curious about this stuff. And it's the same thing here. So if you're talking to somebody and they bring up some sort of thing that they are looking to achieve in life, well, you want to find out what's stopping it and elicit that ego state. So what's stopping you exactly? Well, I just don't have enough time. And well, when you don't have enough time, how does that make you feel? Whatever it is, you're bringing this ego state into the executive. Now you can deal with it, right? You can use one of the methods that we teach and help shut that anchor to that ego state down and put something else in the executive.
Put a different one in the executive. You have to have one there. It's very interesting. I did some ego state self-work, and one of the ways you can do this is with two chairs. And this is Fritz Perls using his chairs to separate ego states. Whether or not he actually realized it was in the brain, I don't know. But you have your ego state that wants to do this, sits in the chair, and you let it express itself out loud. Then you sit in the other chair and ask the ego state that doesn't want you to go to Jamaica to express itself. And you can go back and forth, and by moving geographically, you're spatially anchoring them into different locations.
And having them negotiate.
And talk things through. Or you can have them come out on your hands, like NLP parts work. They're not literally coming out on your hands.
No. It's just a model.
But it's a model of neural pathways in the brain. Gordon Emerson did some great work with the healing hand. And anyone who does self-hypnosis, you can put yourself in a trance and ask your most healing, nurturing, empathetic ego state to move into one of your hands. And whenever you feel trauma or sadness, all you have to do is put that hand over your heart, and that ego state will comfort the other one. Crazy sounding stuff.
Really nice.
But it works really well.
Excellent.
Now, Chris, I just wanted to mention one of the things I dealt with lately was the ego state. I called it not motor mouth, mouthpiece.
Mouthpiece.
This ego state would just start talking about things, trying to get a positive response in situations that were completely inappropriate.
Yeah, it's like an attention-getting ego state.
Yes.
In a sense, right?
And I asked it when it started, and it started in my childhood. You can ask these things in your head. You're not schizophrenic. You're not nuts.
Just trust the instinctual answer that your brain gives you. I was going to say your body gives you, but your brain. And
I can remember talking to John DeSouza on Woodington Avenue. I was about 7 and told him this wonderful story, and he had zero interest, and he just said to me, "Get out of here." And I went home and I felt terrible.
Yeah.
And that state looked for validation, would talk about things like, "Oh, I got this. And did you see this?" And the other person's going, "Why the hell are you telling me this?" So I have asked, in fact, instructed this ego state to stay in the basement until the highest wisdom state educates it on how to behave. Chris, comment on the highest wisdom state.
Well, I guess your highest wisdom state would be thought of as the one ego state that all of the others will listen to.
Yes.
And again, it's not real, it's a model, but whatever is that highest wisdom state that all of the others will listen to and respect and trust. So what is the name of that ego state? What do you call it?
Right. You can call it highest wisdom or the part of me that knows that all the others will listen to. And that's one of the powers of the highest wisdom state. It speaks in a very stentorian, interesting voice. I'm here. Yeah. But the others do listen to it. And it's intriguing that there is such a hierarchy. Remember, I came up with that ego state protocol?
It's going to correlate to your values hierarchy, is my imagination.
Okay, clarify, because that's interesting.
Well, you're going to... Okay, so, for example... When you said highest wisdom ego state, and I thought, just as you were talking right now, I thought, well, what would I call mine? And the name that immediately came to mind was insightful.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, now why is that? Because I very much value knowledge and insight and learning and things like that, right? That's why I love learning and I love teaching. And I find actually most people who like teaching also like learning, because
you got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. You gather information, you process it, and you find an insightful way to teach it in a useful way. And so insightful to me is like one of my highest values is feeling important and smart and knowledgeable and that I have something to give. Right? And so insightful would be the name of the ego state that would kind of collect all the different opinions going on in the other parts of me and be insightful about how to take the right action.
That's very interesting. And if it is the highest wisdom state, by accessing its wisdom, and which I'm finding intriguing, Chris, because you know my one word for 2020 is wisdom. And I'm getting some real insights since I've started thinking of things through the filter of that word. And that was how I found that mouthpiece ego state that would just blurt things out and send it for re-education, re-indoctrination. We're not going to lock it in the bomb shelter. That was the funniest damn thing. Henry Squatter's down there. But you know, we also get, remember I mentioned that different ego states can be executed for different purposes, but we find that, and this is purely our opinion, and other people would concur, I think Gordon Emerson agrees, that depressed people have an ego state problem, because a depressive ego state will hog the executive. It's a strong one, and it won't let happy and fulfilled ego states become executive for long periods of time.
You know, we say it is hard. It is really hard work. It's quite an accomplishment to be depressed all the time, right? And in fact, no one's ever depressed.
No, you got to sleep sometimes.
If you think of it as an ego state model, and if you think about depression as not a thing like depression is a noun. It's a nominalization. It's one of those nouns that you can't put in a wheelbarrow. You can't pick up depression, but you can. So instead of calling it that, call it I am depressing myself.
Back into a process.
It's a process. I am doing things that are depressing in the moment. Stop doing those things, do something else.
Right.
Put a different ego state in the executive to bring it back to the ego state model. And wow, all of a sudden you're happy.
Yes.
Or you're opportunistic, or you're confident, or you're, I don't know, hungry.
Yeah, like whatever it is. Yeah, in fact, even hungry is, you have an ego state that tells you when you're hungry. and you'll be sitting in a chair and you suddenly find yourself in the kitchen standing in front of the fridge. The ego state that says you're hungry has alerted you to go there.
Yep.
This one that tells you time to go to bed. You're tired now. And sometimes with a depressed ego state, they don't want to relinquish the executive, but you start asking the person, what did you used to like doing?
Yeah.
And then through hypnosis, you can have that ego state agree to let other fun states take the executive for certain periods of time.
And the other nice thing we do is a reframe, right? So what is your purpose for Mike? What is your purpose
what is
for
it you
Chris?
do
What
for
is
him?
it that, how is it that you, depression boy, serve Chris? Well, I stop him from trying to do things that I know he can't, and he'll just be disappointed.
That sounds like you're speaking from experience,
let's
buddy.
say
You know
that was
one well.
I was looking for an answer going, well, what would be
Which
the
ego
value?
state gave you that answer?
I don't know, the insightful one, actually. It was my highest wisdom state there going, well, I guess it would be exactly that. Okay, maybe you'd be depressed because you don't, I don't know. I've never really been a depressed person, so.
Now, for those of you who want to follow up on this and do some more work, we highly recommend the books by Gordon Emerson. They're very user friendly. Resource state theory, resource state therapy. His stuff is really, really good. And I also think you might want to check out ego state mapping. This is easy to do on your own. Get a big piece of paper and some colored pens and draw an ego state, just an amorphous sort of shape with
an amorphous blob. Draw an amoeba.
But closed, a closed unit. Like it could be a circle, like a Venn diagram, but generally it's more like an amoeba. And you say, this is the one that, is executive most of the time. Might be the state you call worker or whatever, the one that works. And then find another one. And by overlapping them in the diagram, you can tell which ones know about each other and which ones work together very well. Some will be outside all of this. Like if somebody has an alcoholic ego state that only becomes executive maybe twice a year, it's not going to have strong neural pathways to the other. There'll be something else that gives it the executive. And it's noteworthy that people with extreme substance abuse, it's an ego state that stays executive. So a evaded ego state with the pain does not become executive. The drugs keep it there, or the alcohol keeps it there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. We've talked about this before, and it just resonates very clearly for so many people. It's a helpful model.
Well, let's talk about interactive cards quickly here as well. I recommend you Google interactive cards. And these are a remarkable deck of cards, around the size of tarot cards, but there's nothing mystical about them. They're beautifully made.
We are not promoting tarot
We are
cards.
not witches, but you can get these. We buy them from Caversham Books in Toronto, which is the biggest supplier of psychological and psychiatric books and tools and things, I think, in the world. So C-A-V like Victor, E-R-S-H-A-M. Chris just dropped them.
Yeah, you just dropped the cards.
But, interactive cards. You can do amazing ego state work on yourself by letting these cards represent the archetypes and the parts of your personality. I'd love to say, and you can buy them here, but you can't.
I think if you just go to interactivecards.com, they're there.
Right.
And I know we've podcasted about this this topic before.
Wonderful tool. Now, one more thing.
They're like $20 US.
And they're well worth it. One more thing I want to say to the hypnotists out there, and this may be a life changer or a game changer for many of you, and then we'll go to our empowering question.
Awesome.
The hypnotists out there, you'll run into your difficult subjects. And let me give you an insight. I'm going to codify this and write this up at some point. I've spoken to Chris about it. I have not done this yet, and I want to get to it when I'm not too damn busy. But if you run into a super analytical, skeptical subject, I'm designing a way that you explain parts theory, ego state theory to them very simply and say it's only a part of you that doubts this and doesn't want to be hypnotized. But you have another part that would enjoy the relaxation and would have fun being hypnotized. And that's the one I want you to bring to the surface now. And that's it in a nutshell. And
that's really cool.
And give you a nod when it's there, and your hypnosis will become simple. So you can thank me for that, just as I am thanking me.
Awesome.
Chris, give us our empowering questions of the day.
All right, here is your empowering question for episode 144. Ask yourself what ego states are executive most of the time, and what are their names? When I learn to communicate with them, how awesome will my life be when I address and remove the conflicts?
Awesome, buddy. When you said that, I started asking what mine were called. They have names like Dennis Bryce Morgan, Henry Squatter, Dave Ambrose.
And all the Johnnies.
All the Johnnies. I got a Meta 5 for you. It's the story
All right.
of Mrs. Bardwell, and I've never told you this. when I was a young boy, English boy living in Toronto, still English, very much so. I had a paper route, or paper route if you're British, and I would deliver the Toronto Star. And I had to go, it wasn't the early in the morning one like the Globe and Mail, but I delivered the Toronto Star to a couple of streets not too far from where I lived. I'd have to pick up this big bundle of newspapers I could hardly carry and cut them open with wire cutters. They were bound in wire, put them in a newspaper bag over my shoulder, and then go and do this delivery. Well, the one street I had to deliver to 6, 8, 11, 14, 16, 18, 23, 27, 28, and 28 was the front door. And that was on the one street. Then there were other streets as well. But because it was 6, 8, 11, let's put 11 aside for a minute, 14, 16, 18, you got a row of even numbers there. And so what I would intend to do was deliver the even numbers, then come back and drop one at 11 so I didn't cross over the road right away. That's what was supposed to happen. What actually happened was, Chris will tell you, I do not have, and my wife would love to tell you, I do not have high attention to fine detail at all. I'm a huge picture guy. It's very handy for me to generate new content, to be extremely creative, generate songs on the fly, all of that stuff. And it's a great state for when I study, because I can get in the zone in a few minutes and power stuff into my brain. But you asked me to do a detailed list, and Chris, the number of times he's wanted to stab me or cut my head off, or just, my brain does not work.
It happened today.
It happened today. And I knew he'd love to think about this, but I admit it. So it's okay in some strange way. So 6, 8, 11, 14, 16, 18. I forget to deliver Mrs. Bardwell's damn paper.
Oh.
Mrs. Bardwell was English, like me. She was an imposing figure, had a terrible temper, and I was scared to death of her. I was a little kid. I'd get home, the phone would be ringing. Where's my bloody paper? You forgot my bloody paper, you little snipe. I'd say, oh, and I'd become this polite little Englishman. Sorry, Mrs. Bardwell. Can't imagine how this has happened. Won't happen again. Promise. I'll get you one right away, Mrs. Bring me my bloody paper. And I'd frantically be trembling. Go get a paper from the paper box. I've sold them back to the store, my extras. Take it to Mrs. Bardwell. She'd scream at me at her door. And I would vow I would never do this again until the next day. And it would all happen all over again. Chris, I'm not exaggerating. It probably happened more than a dozen times.
I know. I just wanted to throw that in.
That was good.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Chris has stopped channeling Satan. Go ahead.
Thank you for listening to Brain Software. This has been episode 144 with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. We hope you've really enjoyed our discussion of ego states, subpersonalities, and how to fix your life and live an awesome life because you deserve it. Come to Toronto, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. Check out everything that we are doing. Most specifically, come to the 5-day architecture of hypnosis.
Have the
you
time
can
of
hang
your
out with
life.
us. You'll have a great time.
And you'll learn a ton.
You will hear from us again on the next episode
Of Brain Software.
Thank you, and good night!
Your house is on fire, and the kids won't come home. The lawn tree won't bloom, and your dog needs a bone. Your husband's in his underwear lying in the dock, and there's no one to bury your hamster in the park. So you wash your cotton apron in the sink near the jug with a splash of palm olive from an old cracked mug. The Buick's up on concrete blocks, it's where the raccoons hide. And the neighbor asks you, isn't that the hospital where you died? But I say, Jenny, 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 why not sneak out for a couple of hours and take that $40 you've hidden in the honey jar and head on over to that specialty shop behind the biker bar across from the pool hall on the other side of the tracks and pick up a smooth one for yourself.
That's freaking genius. That's the best.